Chapter 14 is about environmental health and toxicology. So the case study is about BPA, which is short for bisphenol A, and it's in a lot of our plastic products that we use on a daily basis in our homes. It leaches into our bodies. Actually, it leaches out of the plastic into the substance, whether it's water or food. And it mimics estrogen at low doses, which is not good. You don't want extra estrogen in your body, whether you're male or female. So the makers of BPA say it's completely safe, but the data is starting to show that it is not. And so California has banned it in children's products, so baby bottles. It's banned actually for food substances in Europe. But we're starting to get there in the US. Okay, turn to page 361. On this page, know the definition of infectious disease. Sometimes it's called communicable or transmissible. So any of those terms, they're synonyms, could be on your AP test. But basically, these are diseases that can be passed from one person to another. Know the definition of vector. So that's something that passes a disease, a pathogen usually. So a rat will pass on bubonic plague. A mosquito is a vector for malaria or West Nile virus. And then a pathogen, again, is an agent of disease. A pathogen could be bacteria. It could be a virus. It could be a protozoa, like malaria is actually a protozoa, which is a single-celled eukaryotic organism. And now we recognize that we have little strings of proteins called prions that cause disease. So mad cow disease is actually a string of protein, which is kind of frightening because with most other pathogens, if you cook it thoroughly, you kill the pathogen, so the meat product, if you cook it thoroughly. But with mad cow disease, it's a piece of protein, so it doesn't cook out of the meat. And so that was a scare. Oh goodness, it's been over 10 years ago with mad cow disease, but they have contained it as of right now. Turn all the way to page 364, and we have some charts up here. So on this chart, we have the leading causes of death around the world. The leading cause is cardiovascular disease worldwide and also in the US and developed countries. So in the United States, the leading cause of death is cardiovascular disease. So if we were to actually look at this pie chart for the US, so this pie chart's for the world, but if we were to look at it for the US, cancer is almost going to outdo heart disease. I just read an article recently about that, and it's not because cancer is becoming more prevalent, but because heart disease is going down. And so people die, you have to die, and so now cancer is about ready to edge out heart disease, but not yet. So if you're asked on the AP test, it is the answer for the US and for all developed modern countries. The leading cause of death is cardiovascular disease, which sometimes we call heart disease. Now, in a developing country, it's infectious disease. And so these are types of infectious diseases, from respiratory infections like the flu and pneumonia, diarrheal diseases like from cholera or giardia, AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, and childhood diseases because they don't have all their vaccines in developing countries. So these are some stats that are really important that are asked frequently on my tests and the AP test about the leading causes of death in the world. On the next page, we have some increased spread of diseases with global air travel. So now Ebola virus, we had this scare recently where somebody flew in from Africa and brought it to the US, and that would have never happened before air travel. The person probably would have died on a boat getting here. Bioterrorism, we think that terrorists could obtain pathogens and spread them to people. Anthrax was kind of a scare right after 9/11. That following year, some people mailed anthrax through the mail, and so that was kind of an issue. And then global warming increases diseases too, because diseases that are tropical diseases like malaria or cholera, anything that requires warm conditions, as certain parts of the world become warmer, then those diseases that like a warmer climate can spread. Let's talk in particular about malaria. Malaria is a protist, so it's not a bacteria. It's carried by mosquitoes, so the mosquito is the vector, and they like warm and wet environments. So with global warming, if a certain location doesn't get as much freezing as it used to, then the mosquitoes won't die over the winter, and so you'll have mosquitoes year-round, which can not just spread malaria but other diseases like West Nile virus. On page 367, here's some definitions on this page. Know the definition of toxicology and toxicity and a toxicant. Those are very similar, but they have slight differences, so know the names. Radon is a gas that comes out of the bedrock into homes and can cause cancer. It's a naturally occurring gas that's caused from the decay of the earth. Now, in California, we don't have much radon problems because we don't have basements in California due to earthquake issues. But in other places in the country where they have basements that are dug into the earth, the radon can seep into basements. So when I used to live in North Carolina, when you bought or sold a home, you had to have a radon inspection because a lot of homes have basements there. Know what lead poisoning looks like. Know what PBDE is. That is a chemical that they use in pillows and furnitures and plastics as a flame retardant, even TVs and your car dashboard. But they think that slow doses can affect the hormonal system. And then a toxin, know the definition of toxin. Asbestos is an old insulator. It's still in older buildings, and it causes two different things. So asbestosis is a lung condition caused by asbestos. So it's banned now. You can't put asbestos in a building, but older buildings still have it. Now, if you're in an older building, we're talking 50 or more years old, as long as it's sealed in the walls or in the attic, then it's fine. But if you do construction and tear down the building, then they have to do special asbestos removal with hazardous suits and things like that. After the earthquake in Northridge in 1994, a lot of the buildings that were damaged had to have special asbestos removal. Mesothelioma is a lung cancer caused by asbestos. So asbestosis is like a lung damage, and this is the specific cancer caused by asbestos. And then know that a toxin can be natural or synthetic. So there are natural toxins out there like poison oak or poison ivy. But we also can make them artificially in the lab and put them in products. Turn to page 368. This figure and caption is important because it's showing that our stream water and our groundwater has been contaminated with a lot of toxins, pesticides, herbicides, and so we have the percent of your stream water and groundwater that have detections of pesticide. So this would be your agricultural area, which would make sense that they would have the most. And then urban areas and undeveloped areas would have the least. So make sure you understand the contamination in our water supply of these chemicals. So chemicals are really in all of our body, and that's just, we are so exposed that if you draw your blood, and some people have done this and written articles about it, but basically we have all of these chemicals in our body that come from the exposure to all of these things. They're in our bloodstreams. Make sure you also know that Rachel Carson wrote the book Silent Spring, which was about DDT, a pesticide, and her book that was based on a lot of research, what really led to the banning of DDT as a pesticide in the US. So on the next page, starting on 369, you have these definitions. Carcinogen causes cancer, mutagen causes DNA mutations, teratogen causes birth defects. And so you have on this sticky note here to know the definitions of these. A neurotoxin example is lead. Also know that there was mercury dumped into Minamata Bay, Japan, which caused a lot of issues. So mercury is like lead, they're both heavy metals, and they cause brain damage, they cause liver problems and kidney problems, and in higher doses they cause death. Know what an allergen is and what a pathway inhibitor is. Okay, so most toxins, higher dose means higher death. But we have the opposite going on with endocrine disruptors. So an endocrine disruptor, and we see the picture here of what an endocrine disruptor is, it has the opposite effect. So higher doses cause the immune system to kick in. Whoops, I have these mixed up. Cause the immune system to kick in and cause problem. So here's our sticky notes. So so this is the graph for endocrine disruptors. So basically, at a higher dose, the immune system kicks in and goes, it's a toxin, let's get rid of it. So you have very few deaths or problems at a higher dose. But at a smaller dose, you have a lot of deaths or problems because they mimic hormones. But right now, industry is only really tasked with finding out how much of the poison will kill you. And so this is really what they're looking at with regular toxins, that smaller dose, less deaths or problems, higher dose, more deaths or problems. So a problem could be like infertility, doesn't cause death, but it causes a problem, like can't get pregnant or have cancers or things like that. Okay, so let's look at what an endocrine disruptor does. So basically, on each cell you have receptors for hormones, whether it's testosterone, estrogen, or thyroid hormone, or adrenaline, or any of those things. So these chemicals come in like BPA or thalidomide or any of those hormone mimics, and they actually fit into the receptors. And so the body is like, oh, there's a hormone, it's telling me to do something. So a lot of people think that this is the reason why the infertility rates are increasing in the US, why testicular cancer rates are increasing, why boys and girls are going through puberty earlier and earlier because of this exposure to so many endocrine disruptions. But right now, again, the law says this is what you need to focus on. Higher doses mean higher deaths. And so when the industry says, oh, BPA is fine, look, people aren't dying in high doses. Really what needs to happen is the law needs to change, that they need to be testing what happens to humans. Well, they would test rats, actually, not humans, but what's happening at tiny doses over time. We'll continue on with the next video.